WCEGtalkradio.com. Click the live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube at WCEG Network. I'm Dr. Wanzo, your show host of Mind Matters for the next hour. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Last but not least, the topics and opinions are those of the show hosts and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. Good evening. Welcome to Mind Matters, where we discuss relevant mental health issues. I'm your host, Dr. Cassandra Wanzo, a psychiatrist practicing in Atlanta for the past 30 years. Our co-host is Norman Carter Jr. Norm is a retired Philadelphia police corporal. He's written a book that's very relevant to these times, The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop. It's available on Amazon and is very timely. He also hosts his own show on WCEG, Issues and Answers, on Mondays at 4 p.m. Hi, Norm. Can we?
I'm here. I'm here.
Great.
Hi, Doc. How are you?
Okay, so our topic this evening is I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Police shootings and mental health. I'm going to repeat that again. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Police shootings and mental health. On Tuesday, April 20th, the country braced for the impact of the verdict in the murder trial of George Floyd. The whole country, particularly in the African American community, had significant doubts that the jury would render a guilty verdict despite overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution. I held my breath as the verdict was read. Former Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty of second-degree intentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree murder. I was jubilant. Tears streamed down my cheeks. But my jubilance was very short-lived. Within 24 hours, Dante Wright, a 20-year-old Black man, was fatally shot by a police officer during a traffic stop just minutes from where George Floyd died. The female officer stated she thought that she was using her taser. Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old Latino youth, was killed by police in Chicago with his hands up. Makia Bryant, a 16-year-old African-American female, was shot in Columbus, Ohio, after swinging a knife at another teen. Andrew Brown Jr., a 42-year-old Black man in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, was shot in the back of the head in his car as he attempted to drive away. His car had multiple bullet holes. The police department has refused to release the body camera footage. Seeing such killings shared on social media contributes to all types of psychological and mental health distress. It contributes to anxiety, anger, depression, fear of encounters with police officers, insomnia, all types of emotional trauma, hopelessness, stress. It affects both our mental health and physical health. It has deleterious effects on physical and mental health of Black Americans. There was a study at the Kennedy School, the Harvard Kennedy School in 2020, and they showed where the effects of these police shootings impacts the academic achievement of Black and Hispanic children. It causes a collective trauma. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than a white person, and 5 times more likely to be unarmed when killed. Police are more likely to draw and shoot their guns after seeing a Black person than a white person. Stereotypes of Black people, especially Black men, contribute to police killing Black people at a disproportionate rate, studies have shown. I think Will Smith said it best. He said, racism isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. Your reactions, Norm? What are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, a lot of opinions on that. Not all good and not all that flow with the shooting, the last one you spoke of, Mr. Brown. Absolutely awful. There's no way that you can look at that as being a good shooting, number one. Number two, I have mixed emotions. Well, I don't have mixed emotions. I don't think that a public showing of the video of the body cam video is appropriate at this time. And I'll explain why. I think the family and the family's lawyers definitely need to see it.
Okay.
Without question, not the little 20-second blurb that they showed, but show them everything that they need to see. I agree with that. The reason why I say I'm against the public viewing at this moment is because if in the event that those officers involved are criminally charged, then that video pollutes the jury. You're going to have a hard time bringing together a jury after that, because that's just what happened with the Floyd case, where they had a difficult time with the jury because so many people saw the video and had already formed their opinions. So there are legal issues involved. But I think the judge gave a 30-day cooling off period or 30-day period, and then we could view it. That might be okay. And hopefully, the police officers involved will have been charged by then.
Wait, so you're saying that they are going to give a 30-day cooling off period? Because I hadn't heard. I just heard that the court had refused to release it.
Well, I think the judge's order was that it wouldn't be released before 30 days. He wanted to hold it back 30 days before any type of public viewing.
So 30 days would be to the public or to the family and the attorneys?
Well, to the public.
Okay, and that's the full video?
Well, whatever they're willing to show. I think right now they're obligated by any code of decency to show that to the family and the lawyers. Yeah, there's going to be a civil suit. So what? The family needs to see what they need to see. I don't think the public needs to see that at this time. At some point, absolutely. But I don't understand the rush to put this out publicly. I think the family and the family's lawyer need to see that so they can decide on what they need to do. It's of public interest, I agree. But a lot of that public interest is just macabre. It's just macabre, and it's not relevant, because are you going to be any more? You already know it's a bad shooting. Are you going to be any more convinced after you see the shooting, so you can go back and say, oh, wow, that was really awful? And again, you're showing this to children because it's going to be out there in the public on TV. So children are going to see it and they're going to be adversely affected by it. You're going to there's a portion of the public who are not mentally equipped to see that type of thing. I think you remember one of the jurors on the Floyd trial, the one who's he's out there now.
Right.
But he said that it was difficult seeing a person killed over and over again. And this is not television. You see a man shot in the head, shot 5 times, shot in the head at close range. Do you really want that on television? You talk about trauma, and and at some point, it's going to make us callous towards that type of stuff.
You're right, because it tends to watching a lot of violence tends to desensitize you. That's true. That
Correct.
is.
Yeah. The other 2 shootings, and I didn't want to get into this right away,
Okay.
but the shooting of Dante Wright. Well, let's talk about the police officer involved first, the female police officer.
Okay.
You are trained to work under pressure. You are trained to work under pressure. When you at these classes where you have your pistol training, firearms training, or your taser training, you've got people yelling at you. You're under pressure. You're under time constraints because what they want to do is to get you used to working under pressure. That's number 1. Number 2, she had 26 years on the police department.
Yes.
If you don't know the difference between the feel of a taser and the feel of a Glock, and that's right in front of you, and you're saying taser, taser, and you can't see that that's not a taser, it's a gun. That's just crazy. And I saw that scene, and I've been involved in similar situations in my career. There was no need for a taser. First of all, they handled the arrest wrong. You had one cop handcuffing this guy. There should have been 2 standing there. There should have been 2. There was just one standing in close proximity. In case he twisted or bolted like he did, there's someone else there to grab him. That was the first error. Then he gets into the car and he's trying to drive away. Now I'm blaming him for that because I talk about this often. Dante.
Okay.
This whole thing that your lawyers don't talk about, that your activists don't talk about, is that once you begin to resist arrest, and believe me, I'm not apologizing for the police officers, but once you begin to resist arrest, you set into motion things that are totally out of your control. Because at the time that he was being handcuffed, there was nothing brutal being done. He had criminal charges against, he had warrants against him. He was legitimately being arrested. And he initially complied, and then the little light bulb went off in his head and say, I don't want to go to jail. Now the cops were totally wrong. And there's no way to make that any better than what it was. Either you're poorly trained or you're just a lousy cop. When you can't tell it, if your excuse is, I thought I had a taser, I'm telling you, they feel differently. They look differently. So that's a poor excuse. There was no excuse for drawing either a taser or a gun at that time. This all could have been handled by hands-on. This all could have been handled by hands-on. With the lady, the young girl, Makia.
Makia Bryant.
This is another incident where people who have no concept of the law are jumping on it and saying that it's wrong. None of these people who are saying that have talked to the girl whose life was saved. Not one. Not one. And the police have the authority to use deadly force when the life of another is being threatened. That's the law everywhere. And the cop doesn't have a chance to say, okay, would you please put the knife down? This was in the heat of battle. She was going after that other woman with the knife.
What about a taser? Couldn't they have used a taser?
This is another incident where you have to make a split-second decision. You can't say, okay, well, should I use the taser or should I use my gun? And tasers have been shown not to work with people who are highly agitated. That's why you see people sometimes being multiple taser hits on them. People who are highly agitated. She was about to kill somebody. If someone's about to kill me and a cop pulls up, please, Mr. Officer, do what you have to do to save my life.
So you say that's the only option, deadly force. That was the only option in that situation, deadly
Yeah,
force?
well, she named the game, if I can put it that way. She named the game. The game was that she was playing was deadly. And there are consequences for that. And you can't expect a cop to come up and say, oh my, she's going after this woman with a knife. What should I do? You have to make an immediate decision. And that's a case where the police officer is going to be found justified. These other incidents that we can talk about, no. We can talk about Rayshard Brooks. I don't know whether you're aware.
I saw today that the officer was reinstated.
Yeah. And with Rayshard Brooks, this is something that I talk about when I do public appearances, public speeches. Police departments, well, the whole arrest of officer, whatever his name is, this was a political rush to judgment on him. I quoted the statement from former Philadelphia coach, I can't think of his name right, Dick Vermeil, who said that if you listen to the crowd, you'll wind up there with them, because he was criticized for a lot of things that he did as a football coach. And the same thing here, the mayor and the district attorney violated their own procedures for political expediency. He was running for office, so he wanted to look good. And she says that she was worried about the riots that were going on to get worse. So she was on board. The police chief, who knew better, did not sign off on the paperwork because she knew better and she wasn't going to be sucked in. That's why she's gone. She did the right thing. She did the right thing. The mayor and the district attorney. Now, I'm going to tell you what's supposed to happen, because this is what's done in Philadelphia. Situation like that, you are suspended for 30 days pending dismissal. This gives you time for your lawyers to get involved and appeal whatever action is being done, whatever administrative things that have to be done. 30 days pending dismissal. In the meantime, you're suspended, you're not working, you're not making any money. At the end of those 30 days, you're dismissed. And if the arrest process could take place before those 30 days. But you are suspended for 30 days, so there's not that big rush. And then it's up to the mayor and the district attorney to explain to the public, because not all of the public is stupid. And to say to the public, our procedure is to suspend this man for 15 or 30 days pending dismissal. He's going to lose his job. And after that, there may be other action taken, but at this moment, he's suspended pending dismissal. The public can understand that. But there was criticism of what they did when it happened. And it was said that the district attorney was playing politics with this. And so now this man is going to get back pay. He may not get back on the job, but he's definitely going to get back pay. So he's benefiting financially, at least for a little while. So what's that, about $60,000-$70,000 maybe?
So what about the shooting itself?
The shooting was a bad shooting.
Okay.
Bad shooting.
When you keep saying, you use the term good shooting and bad shooting, I mean, how can there be a good shooting? You say good shooting, bad shooting?
No, when there are shootings which are legitimate, where your life is threatened or the life of another is threatened, and I'm condensing it. Those shootings are legitimate. Those are what we call good shootings. A bad shooting is your life is not in danger. No one else's life is in danger, but you shoot somebody either negligently or maliciously. And he was shot, excuse me, Rashard Brooks was shot because he beat the cops up and he
Wow.
ran away. The cop, he turned and pointed the taser at the cop, but the cop knew the taser wasn't deadly. And he was some 30 or 40 feet away from him. So the taser could not have done anything to him. But he shot him and killed him because he was mad. He was mad because he got beat up. And they handled that arrest wrong. I could get into details about that, but that's not important right now. But that was that was what you call a bad shooting. It was an improper shooting. It should not have happened. If Rashard Brooks ran away and got away, so be it. You knew who he was. You had his car. You had his identification. Let him he gets away. You know what? You can arrest him on another day.
So
they train you that way.
Okay. What about this whole issue of qualified immunity, where officers individually can't be sued? So, I mean, from my understanding, that the majority of the people want that to be, done away with, the majority of the population.
The majority, yeah, true. And I think that in this era where we're trying to get and demand accountability, I think it's a good thing. I think Colorado has just instituted that in their state.
Were they done away with qualified immunity?
Yes, yes. And there's certain restrictions that they have. But the gentleman, excuse me, was on CNN a couple of days ago. But yeah, they have a version of that in Colorado. They were the first state in the United States to do that. But what they're trying to do is to get that legislated federally, and they're running into a lot of political roadblocks on it.
So I've heard from the other standpoint, from law enforcement, that they don't want it, to be removed because they feel that it affect their ability to do their job. But you
no. Okay. Well, here's the thing. If you go out and you maliciously shoot somebody, I mean, there are some people who are a little haphazard with what they do for guns. You've seen, and I was talking about this with several police officers recently. You've seen a lot of these body cam footages where they're pulling up on people and they're yelling at them, show me your hands, get out the car, and they're using all this profanity. That is not the way you do police work. When you think of somebody who's white and superior talking to a black inferior, yeah, that's the way that you talk. But when you're talking, I have made many officers I know have made felony arrests, and we don't talk or act like that. Or you're pulling somebody over for the soldier we talked about, pulling over for a minor traffic violation.
Yes.
And you're getting out with your guns pointed out and all that sort of stuff for no reason. I can count the times that I had my gun out during my career, and you don't pull it out for every little car stop that you make. Those things just aren't done. So that's part of the ingrained racism.
Exactly.
And the people who are most vocal against it are the people who are most likely guilty of, and they worrying about, oh my gosh, I might lose my house. I might lose everything I have if I do the wrong thing. But the way that the Colorado law, which probably would be a model for everyone, is written, is that there has to be overwhelming evidence that you maliciously did something. Not that you made an error, a little mistake in judgment, but that you maliciously did something. So there has to be overriding evidence. So no, it's not like every time a cop does something, you're going to sue him and collect money on a civil suit. There has to be overwhelming evidence that the police officer maliciously intended to do what he did. So the case of Floyd, Mr. Floyd, with Officer Chauvin.
Mhm.
That would be a case that, where that would be a good case for that, because what he did was malicious,
Mhm.
it was negligent, and it was even proven in court,
Mhm.
in a criminal court.
Mhm.
So that would be a case where if qualified immunity came in, he would be sued. But we always have to remember that the public still has the ability to sue the state, to sue the city when those type of things happen. It's not like it's nobody gets anything, but you're able to sue the city and sue the police officer.
So the settlement that the Floyd family got, the 27 million, that was from the city, the state?
Correct. Yes.
That
Yeah.
was the city?
That was the city. The same thing with was it Breonna Taylor
Oh,
in
yes.
St.
Yes.
Louis?
Mhm.
It was suing the city. The city paid. There was just no provisions to sue the
Mhm.
police officer.
Mhm.
I think Philando Castile.
Yes.
I don't know whether that's been settled yet,
Mhm.
but that's going to be where the city will pay.
Mhm. Mhm. So on Chauvin, I heard about it after the trial, but they refused to allow into court the example where he put his neck on another young man's neck for several minutes in a previous incident.
Correct. There's supposed to be several other incidents where he did the same thing, several other complaints, and they weren't allowed to present that
Mhm.
into evidence. I can sort of understand that.
Mhm.
One of the things that I talk about is that when it comes to prosecuting police officers, especially, some of your government leaders are just ignorant of them, but some of them just don't practice. But the public needs to know that when these things happen, there are rules of evidence that have to be followed. There are the rights to counsel,
Mhm.
and there are written policies about discipline and terminations. Now, the rules of evidence and the rights to counsel, they don't not only apply to police officers, but they apply to everyone out, all civilians, all people, the public in general. So those are the same rules. And sometimes those rules are purposely violated because they know down the road that a conviction or an action will be overturned because a lawyer is going to bring out, oh, well, you didn't do this, or you questioned him too long, or you did something else wrong, or you handled the evidence wrong.
Mhm.
This was, I know, in my city of Philadelphia, and I'm sure uh, my former city of Philadelphia, I know it was done then, and I'm pretty certain it was practiced in other states. And that's why you see police officers sometimes being arrested and then getting released on a technicality.
Mhm.
You have the egregious case like we have here in Atlanta, where the officer, the Civil Service Commission, ruled that he can get his job back, that he was fired improperly, and you have to blame the mayor and the district attorney for that. But that has nothing to do with the criminal charges. He's still facing criminal charges.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow. So, given that he's still facing criminal charges, he can get his job back?
yeah, and that's the murky issue.
Huh?
That's the murky issue. So legally, they're going to be obligated probably to pay him all back pay and benefits that he was due. Um, as far as getting his job back, that's a prickly pear. I can't see that happening. I'm not going to say it won't happen. They can put him back, and he would be somewhere in an office somewhere, sitting behind a desk with nothing but drawers and no papers. And that's where he would sit for 8 hours a day. Yeah. But he would be getting paid as a police officer until he's convicted of a crime.
So I see that the attorneys for Chauvin have filed a motion to, I forgot exactly, but something about having it overturned or retried or
Right.
right. So
Yeah. 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 They could be grappling at straws, but this is what they do, and they're being paid for by his attorneys are being paid for by this police organization.
oh,
Yeah.
Oh, what, like the Fraternal Order of Police or what?
No, it's a different organization altogether, but the police officers pay into it
Oh,
for, and one of the benefits of it is legal representation.
so that's a local or national organization?
It's within their state. It's
Oh,
like a state organization. You have the local, it's for one of the better terms, Fraternal Order of Police, but they don't call it that. And then it's the Minneapolis Police Association, and
mhm.
then there's another one, like the Minnesota something or whatever.
Okay,
So
okay.
they're two different entities, not
Mhm,
related to one another, but
mhm,
they're paying for his defense.
mhm. Okay. When you mentioned Philando Castile, that brought to mind, I had read somewhere there was this guy, and I can't remember. I know he was a Marine. I can't remember if he was the police that goes around and gives trainings on how to kill and to lose any fear and emotions associated with killing to make you feel good about killing people. And he trains
I,
police officers.
I don't.
And they said the officer who killed Fernandez can still attended one of this guy's seminars. He goes around
Wow.
the country giving seminars on how to kill and feel good and no remorse for killing.
I know a couple of police officers that I'm sure
Mhm.
are like that.
Okay.
Um, what I will say is that, and this is talking about mental health, I think that any police officer involved in any shooting where a person is shot needs to go through a period of treatment
Mhm.
before allowed to come back on duty.
Does that
Uh,
exist now? Is that a
in
any?
some departments,
Okay.
I'm sure it's not universal.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it needs to happen. It needs to be mandatory. I don't think any officer involved, and I don't care whether it's a shooting where, I hate to use the phrase again, a good shooting where the police officer was in fear of his life,
Mhm.
and the only option he had was to shoot because the other person would have shot him.
Mhm.
Uh, Even in that type of incident, it's it's traumatizing
Mhm.
uh, to shoot somebody. If you've ever talked to military people who've been in the military, uh, it's traumatizing
Mhm.
to know that you killed somebody.
Mhm.
Uh, it's not. I'm saying trying to not maybe not to be to the point of being debilitating at that time, but there's a psychological price you pay down the road,
Mhm. Were you
and
in the military? Were you in the military?
I certainly was.
Right.
Yes, for 3 years.
So what does that process involve being, like you said, trained to be able to kill someone? I mean, to me, because that's a hard
Well,
concept for me to
no,
think about.
well,
Yeah.
you're from the basic training in the Army,
Mhm.
you're you're trained to dehumanize whoever your enemy is.
That's what you're talking about.
It's they stress the kill or be killed philosophy,
Mhm.
and you practice it every single day. It's drilled into your head, and you practice it every day, and it becomes a part of you. And you have to keep in mind that most of the people going into the service are young.
Mhm.
So how can I say this? Your mind is more malleable than it is when
Mhm.
you're like 30, 40, or 50 years old. And
Mhm.
so you can train people to do that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's either him or me. So boom, I'm going to shoot you or kill you because I don't want to die.
Mhm.
Um, you're trained that way. But there's a psychological price that you pay after that. I know people, a member of my church today,
Mhm.
who's he's in his late 60s,
Mhm.
still traumatized by things that he saw that happened to him in the military career. My brother, who basically drank himself to death because
Mhm.
he was traumatized by things that happened to him in Vietnam.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, it's traumatic, and that's why I'm saying that any police officer needs to be trained, debriefed, needs to be counseled for, I would say, a minimum of 30 days after being involved in any police shooting, no matter what type of police shooting it is. The other part about that is, and that's what we're dealing with now, is the psychological damage being done by people like, and I'm going to use Falanco Castile as an example, who was shot for nothing. He was doing everything right. He did everything right. He told the officer, "I have a weapon, but I have a license," and he was reaching for the license to give to the officer, and he was shot. The there's a couple of other ones I have down here.
But I'm saying that officer who killed Philando Castile, he attended one of these seminars that this guy gives about how to kill and harden people up to kill. He attended one of these guys' seminars. I'll have to find his name, but I remember.
And that's something that should be banned by the local police department.
But they offer that. Is that part of police training? This
No.
Dehumanization. That's not part.
No.
Okay.
No. What happens is you can get into a situation where you associate with people who will dehumanize. I remember, and my experience was totally in Philadelphia, but criminals were, to some people, they were all called critters. So, and this is what you do in the military, what happens in the military. But if you look at people as a critter, which is a little animal, then that's dehumanizing. This is the same. It's the same thing that goes on, and I'm probably one of the few who campaigns against this. Is Black people using the N-word? It's dehumanizing. So you look at that person not as not as a person, but as a thing.
Exactly.
And so that's the mentality where, okay, these criminals, we're going to call them critters. Oh, they just all happen to be Black. Wow, well, that's an accident. Well, then you begin to treat them the way you treat critters. Probably worse than you treat critters, because you don't even treat dogs that way.
This was used in Philadelphia, you're saying this term?
Yeah, during my career.
Really?
Yeah. And you're kind of like, okay, I don't want to be around you, but that goes on everywhere. So the thing with the officer, I think the officer with Mr. Castile was Hispanic. He wasn't white.
Oh, okay.
And
although some Hispanics see themselves as white,
yeah, I know.
Some Hispanics,
I know.
Yeah.
But I think it's
especially Cubans.
I think, well, yeah, certain Cubans,
in Florida,
lighter Cubans,
right?
The dehumanization process, that's all part of the socialization that I talk about on police departments, where and this is, I might sound like I'm going afield here, but the object when you come into police academy and when you go your first time going to the Fraternal Order of Police, it's always stressed, we're all blue. We're all blue. And then you're hearing from you see things and you go, no, we're not all blue, because I see this happening to white folks and this happening to Black folks. It's different. But what happens is, and we saw this in Atlanta, where you have on a line of police officers blocking entrance to CNN or whatever, and you have someone going up to a Black police officer, nose to nose, spitting in his face, and the cop isn't allowed to do anything. He has to stand there and take it. And what happens is, when he goes back to his unit, the white officers in his unit say, see, I told you, they don't care what color you are. Like we told you, we're all blue. So now you're in a society that's telling you, you have a group of people that you work with who's saying, You belong to us. You don't belong to them. They don't even look at you as who you think you are. They look at you as a cop. They don't look at you as a black cop. So a lot of cops aren't able to cope with that. A lot of police officers aren't able to cope with that.
Remember the Capitol, like the black officers, how people spit on them and they were called names and mistreated the black officers at the Capitol.
Yeah, but those are predominantly whites that were doing
exactly.
that.
Right. But you know, the guys were in this position, these white men are mistreating them and calling them.
Yes. And some of those people were cops, which is a whole nother story.
Oh, yeah. So what about cops being infiltrated by paramilitary, KKK, white supremacist groups?
That's been going on forever. We know about it in the 60s with the three gentlemen who went to Mississippi to register voters, two whites and one black young guy.
Warner, Cheney, and Goodman?
Yes. I can never remember those names. Okay. Yes. As soon as you say it, I know. Okay. But the police were involved in that. They were all hooked up with the KKK and other white supremacist groups. Now you have the KKK, you've got the neo-Nazis. They're still with us. And a lot of them have infiltrated police departments.
Wow. Somebody mentioned on Facebook, they mentioned enemy combatants and how even in the military, children are the enemy.
You got to qualify that. What they're talking about is, and I'll talk about Vietnam.
Okay.
In Vietnam, what the Vietnamese would do is they would take a kid, they would take his family prisoner. And they would take a little kid, or sometimes it was a female, adult female, and they would load them with explosives. And they would say, you walk over there to where those soldiers are and you pull that pin or we're going to kill your family. So little kids who don't know any better, and these are the ones, they would take them and give them a grenade or wire them up with an IUD and have them walk up to where the soldiers are, and then the whatever they had would explode. So what happened is, when these little kids would come towards wherever the military was, they would yell at them to stop. And if they didn't stop, they would shoot them. That did happen. But that was because a lot of these kids were wired up with explosives. And so they weren't just going around shooting kids just to be shooting kids. You have to know why that was done. That's again, that is part of the horrors of war. And people who have never been in war, who keep saying we need to go to war with this country or go to war with that country, have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Because as the saying goes, war is hell. And it's not just you getting shot, you're getting shot at. So, yeah, but that's a whole different, I think I might be getting away from from what we're talking about with police shootings. But I think that a lot needs to be done still. Yes, there are some shootings that are totally unjustified. I can tell you some that are. But the thing of it is that there are too many that are unjustified. There are far too many.
When it comes to black people, when it comes to
yes. And you know, I always have statistics. I can do this real quick. Okay. This is according to the Washington Post. It was updated on April 27, 2021. I've done some research on this before. The Washington Post is the most authoritative place to go to find any information on police shootings. Blacks, total population, this is taken from January 1, 2015 to now. Total blacks, 42 million. Number killed, 1,507. That's 36 per million. And let me just drop down to white. White, 197 million in population, 282,886 whites killed at a rate of 15 per million. So the it's better than twice the rate.
Exactly.
Better
Yes.
than twice the rate.
Yes.
The number is different. They have more in number,
Right.
but
Mhm.
the rate of them being killed
Yes.
is surely way out of proportion. Most victims of shootings are males between the ages of 20 and 40.
Exactly. Mhm.
And yeah, that's the crux of it. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I'm actively involved in it, is trying to get some of our government leaders clued in or involved, because there has to be some legislation done on a national basis. I know that they're being faced with what they call the George Floyd Act right now, but there needs to be more accountability in the police departments. Forget the word justice; it's about accountability, and there's not enough of that. Mr. Chauvin, how many people had he brutalized
Exactly.
before Mr. Floyd?
They said he had numerous complaints against him.
Yes, he did. He did. Uh, I remember when the young lady revealed that on CNN. She's a young activist, and she brought it out, and the people who were on the show were dumbfounded because they hadn't heard this, but it was because it had been suppressed before the trial. But he had a long record, and they tolerated it.
Mhm.
The departments tolerated it, and you can go through department after department after department where these bad eggs are there. They've been tolerated. There are more than one complaint about them being brutal or doing things that are totally beyond the law and beyond policy, and they're being protected. And this is why people are calling for police reform. I just hope, and that's the reason why I've been writing to senators and congresspeople, is that my hope is that they are listening to people who know how the system works, how police departments work, rather than listening to activists who are outside of the situation, who have great intentions but don't know the internal mechanisms that can work against any policy that they establish. So that has to be dealt with.
But how do
But
you change the whole structure? My concern is, I mean, into my recruiting, other officers and whatever. But if they're going into this whole system and a structure, I mean, how do you change the structure of policing?
you change the leadership,
Mhm.
you change the philosophy,
Mhm.
and you have to force feed it to people. People have to know that there are consequences. The um, qualified immunity,
Mhm.
getting rid of that,
Mhm.
that's like a huge step um, in the right direction. That's a huge step in the right direction because nobody wants to be held personally accountable.
Mhm.
And again, it's not for making a little small mistake in judgment. That's not what this is about. This is when officers are either negligent or purposely malicious. That's what this is about.
And you
So
said it has to be done at the state level?
we're trying to get it done at the federal level.
Mhm.
We're trying to get that to federal so it's uniform across the country.
Mhm. Do you know, is that part? I know President Obama had some type of reform act. Is that part of
Yes,
that? I didn't get a chance to read all the details. Are you familiar with what
but
elements are in his
what
program?
well he tried to
Mhm.
get reform policies in place,
Mhm.
and the Republicans stonewalled it.
Do you know what the tenets of his proposal?
I
I didn't
don't know
get a chance
all.
to
I don't
review
remember all the details,
it.
but it really dealt with the police shootings and establishing a database
Mhm.
of officers um, who had complaints against them for brutality. So yeah, it's the whole culture needs to be changed.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I need to say this because we're in public,
Mhm.
is that the majority of the police officers that are in that career are people who want to do the right thing. The majority. What happens is the bad ones, the ones who are protected by your fraternal order of police and by other things and by the cultures in those departments, they are in the minority, but they are so powerful. They are so powerful because they have the ears of politicians. Um, they have the ears of, and that's the big thing, because these are the ones who are active in the unions because they need to be active in the unions, and it's horrible. And one of the ways that we change that is we need some new blood, and that's why I am among several people who are trying to actively recruit African Americans to come to take on the job in police departments.
Someone on Facebook said that's why it's so difficult to recruit people of color to become police, because they get hit from all sides.
Yeah, well, we're going to have on my next program, Issues and Answers, we're going to be talking about that, exactly about that. I'm going to have some police officers in my next two programs dealing with that specific issue. When I came onto the police department in 1967, these same issues existed, and what cities, and there were many national commission studies that said that they needed to have more African American police officers on police departments, and that's how I got on the police department. There was a big push to have more representations in the African American community, and again, that needs to happen, and that will only happen when we, as Black people, stop demonizing all police, because we need to be specific with who we're demonizing and who we're accusing. But to sit and as a group say that all cops are bad, that means that you're never going to get an influx of fresh new thought and fresh people. And you're definitely not going to get any more African Americans, because community pressure can keep a lot of people from joining. And I talked about this with a police officer yesterday, because this happened with me. No one in my family wanted me to be a cop. My neighbors definitely didn't want me to become a cop. I wrote about this in my book. And you have to be willing and committed to what you want to do and follow through with it and take that step. Will you lose friends? You will never lose friends. You'll lose hangers on.
Okay.
But you'll never lose friends. And I had a lot of people who I can say were my friends before I joined, and they were my friends to this very day. You're not going to lose friends. You're going to lose hangers on. So don't worry about that. And once you embark on a new career, you're going to make new friends, all of whom are not police officers. If you're open enough, your life doesn't stop. And if you're committed to coming on to joining police work and doing a great job and remain faithful to your good ideals and realize the plight of things that are happening in your community, you'll be fine.
Someone mentioned from Facebook, Cleveland is implementing a consent decree from the Department of Justice. So what does that mean exactly?
Well, that means that that's probably has something to do with reorganizing the department and training, but the consent decree means that the Justice Department finally probably found some deficiencies in their training and practices. So what they're doing is saying, we're not going to admit fault, but we're going to change some policies. Excuse me. They're likely training policies. So and probably disciplinary policies also.
Because I know there were a couple of police departments, Minneapolis, and I forgot the other department, where they were getting some kind of being investigated for their practices.
Yes. Minneapolis is the Department of Justice, and Louisville.
In Louisville, okay.
In Louisville, they're being their whole practices and training and everything is being investigated because the Breonna Taylor incident was just horrible. I mean, not just from the standpoint of the police, if you know anything about policing, but the district attorney, even uh, totally wrong, totally misled the grand jury. So that was a layered thing. It was the police department. It was the person who signed the warrant. And I think I explained this on one of your programs before. There were a whole lot of layers that were just plain wrong. There was no need to execute a warrant after midnight. That type of nonsense that that people, the public, is not really aware of. And there's a lot of things done. The signing of the warrant, the taking out of the warrant, all wrong, all wrong. And yeah, that's a systemic problem. And you have those problems in other police departments.
Okay. We have a few minutes left. So I wonder if you would give tips to our audience, male and females, because African Americans, Latinos are more likely to be, killed by police. Just some tips in terms of what to do if you're stopped by the police. Some common sense tips and guides to what to do if you're stopped.
Okay, the first common sense step is comply. Okay. The police officer has a right to ask you for your driver's license and registration. They have and your insurance card. They have a right to stop you and do that. Excuse me. Now they have to stop you for a legitimate reason. And if they're good cops, good police officers, when they stop you, they're going to tell you the reason that stopped you, first of all. So that's a question that you shouldn't have to ask. But absent knowing why you were stopped, the police officer stops you and asks you for your identification and all your registration, just give it to them. The other tip that I never get into the situation where you're going to say, what's your badge number? You're looking at them. You can see their badge number. You can see the tab. Make a mental note if you think they're doing something wrong. Don't try to play lawyer out on the street. Save that for later. There are venues where you can go to do that. The other thing is, if you're being arrested, comply. Just comply. The officer's wrong. Okay, we're going to deal with the wrongness later. You're not going to solve the problem there on the street because the officer has overwhelming numbers. You can't win. Those are number two. Those are two things that you can do. It's not a infringement on your masculinity or your adulthood if you comply with those simple requests. And we've raised a generation of people who think that cops don't have a right to do anything. That cops don't have a right to stop you. They don't have a right to ask for your license. They do. They have that right.
What about the right to search your car?
Whole nother issue. Whole nother issue. If you have not been excuse me, charged with a crime or being arrested for a crime, police officer does not have the right to search your car. Now, I know that a lot of times, officers will stop you and they will say, would you mind if we searched your car? You can tell them no.
Okay.
Excuse me. And if they go ahead and force you to search, number one, that's a civil suit. And number two, even if they found anything in your car, it's inadmissible in court.
Okay. What about videotaping, them?
Yeah, do that, but don't do it in an intimidating manner. You don't take the camera and put it right in the cop's face.
Okay.
He shouldn't care. He or she shouldn't care, but you're dealing with human temperament here. Okay. So yeah, like the officer, the soldier who was stopped by the two cops. I mean, he had his video going when they stopped him.
Exactly.
So he wasn't putting it in his face, but he videotaped everything.
One comment, someone said, we see people that have complied and were still murdered and arrested unjustly.
Correct. And there's nothing we can do about that. But what we're talking about is I'm trying to minimize, as I talked about Dante Wright, he could have just complied and been handcuffed and he would be in jail today. Rashard Brooks, if he had complied and just let the police officers handcuff him and take him in, he would still be alive. This doesn't say that the cops were right. But what I'm trying to do, and it's like you gotta like pound it into people's heads, is that I'm trying to minimize. If I can save one life, two lives, that's my goal.
Okay.
There are people who die unnecessarily, and that's what I'm trying to prevent.
Okay. Thank you so much for your advice at
Excuse
the
me.
end of the show, and appreciate everything, your input. So I may can do like a part 2 for next time. I guess I'll see how it goes and what's happening in the world by then. But I thank all of our listeners. We're part of the Worldwide Empowerment Group. You've been listening to Mind Matters, and we wish you a blessed rest of the evening and week. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Oh, happy Mother's Day.